in, episode 145.
Hello, hello, hello.
Hello, beautiful. How are
How
you?
are you?
Grateful. Super grateful to be here.
Right?
Yes. Yes. What about you?
Yes, yes. It's been a really full week and a lot of changes and a lot of differences, and I'm glad to be with you, and I'm glad we could sort this out. And
Yes.
yeah, it is it's been an interesting week.
I hear you. And this year, the beginning of it has been different for me too. And we were talking about it before the podcast, just going with the flow,
Mhm.
and I used to say, if y'all don't know, I used to say only dead fish go with the flow. And it's kind of in line with our topic today, the living and thriving with grief, right? And so I learned, y'all, that not only dead fish go with the flow, and it actually helped me when we were volunteering. I'll tell the story real quick at a garden. Right. And we were taking up the roots, we were taking up all these weeds and different things. And this woman taught us to go with the grain of the root that's in the ground, right? Don't try to go against nature. I said, go against nature. That makes sense. That might not be the wise thing. You're probably making it more difficult for yourself. So sometimes going with the flow helps me with my emotional and mental wellness. And we'll go into it today.
I love that. I love that. Yes, let's go into it more. I want to talk more about going with the flow after we do our intro, if that
Okay,
works for you. All
let's
right,
do
let's
it.
do it.
Let's do it. Hey, y'all. I'm Shannon Mitchell, a Black millennial entrepreneur and Amazon bestselling publisher, author, and all natural product manufacturer. I'm a champion for your natural self care, sustainable business care, and overall intentional wellness.
Hey, y'all, I'm Christine Gautreaux, a white social justice advocate, an international speaker, Amazon best-selling author and publisher, a coach, and a dancing social worker who helps you upgrade your self and community care.
Yes, together we are a podcast rooted in the 8 dimensions of wellness and the co founders of Women Connected in Wisdom Community.
And we like to get together every week and have intentional conversations about how to be wise in business, relationships, and wellness. And often we have expert guests. Today is Shannon and I. Um,
Yes.
we just send some love to our guest who was supposed to be here today because she had a
Yeah.
family emergency. But
Yes.
today we are talking about emotional and mental wellness for episode 145 and talking about living and thriving with grief.
Whew. And over the last few years, it's funny, a memory came up. And guess where we were?
Where
Guess.
were we?
Guess. One
Where
of your
were we?
places. One of your
Um,
places you used to take people, you used to take groups of people, and we would that's all I'm gonna
well,
tell you.
okay. There's so many of
I
those,
know.
but it could be a coffee shop. It could
You
be,
have 2 more guesses.
I
That's
have
a
two more
no.
guesses.
Yes.
Could be a waterfall.
Okay, no. You have 1 more.
Okay, a place I've taken groups of people.
I'll give you a
Mm,
hint because
Okay.
it'll make it a little easier, but not too much easier. It starts
Okay.
with a G,
Oh, it starts with a G. Well, then that makes me think Gwinnett 101.
right? No, it's not it. Okay. So we were at the Geek Space.
Ah, yeah,
Yes.
I love me some geek space.
Yes. We were
They're
at
moving.
where are they
That's a whole
moving?
nother story.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, we'll tag them in our show notes, but they're
Yeah.
moving. I haven't seen their new space yet. But
Wow.
for our listeners who may not know, Geek Space is a maker space in
Mhm,
Gwinnett County,
mhm.
and fabulous group of people. And they do trainings, they do laser printing, they do 3D printing.
Yes.
I mean, just ooh, mwah, I
Yes.
miss them. I used to be really involved with them before the pandemic, and
Mhm.
then haven't made time in my schedule. But
I hear
yeah,
you.
okay. So
Yes.
back to your dream.
So the memory, right? So memories popped up, and it was Manifestation Monday when we had
Mhm,
started going to Geek Space because we were transitioning as COVID. We moved from Starbucks, went to
mhm,
Geek Space, and have been
mhm,
virtual since, right? And I was like, wow, that was around the time that my mom passed away,
mhm,
before I had businesses.
mhm.
And I think about everything that you and I have had on our plate, right? A lot of people would say we've thrived. Two author
Mhm.
cohorts, Amazon bestsellers, two businesses, communities, summits, connected in vision, multiple years. And there's been so much grief and
Right?
loss and heavy things that we have worked through and lived through, thankfully, and been able to balance, right? Like we always do our quotes. And so I've been so thankful and grateful. And that's why I came in with the gratitude like, wow, we've really come a
Right?
long way with everything
Right?
on our plate.
Really living and thriving because, our regular listeners know, because if you've been listening to the last year's episodes, you've been with us on this journey. But, last year I lost 5 family members.
Wow.
And I think about my practices and tools and community,
Yeah.
and just so great. I'm with you. So grateful to be able to be still standing and dancing and thriving in the midst of really big stuff, right? And that doesn't even include the world, like what's going
Right.
on in the world, right?
Right.
And so it's like, holy guacamole, Batman.
Mhm.
Like, this is a lot.
Yeah, it is. So can we unpack that a little bit, right? When
Sure.
I think about Christine Gautreaux and her tools, right, I think about
Mhm,
looking at beauty, flowers and
mhm,
animals and nature, your time
mhm,
outside, right? I think about still point and the
mhm.
importance of taking that time throughout the work to still yourself, to pause, and whatever you would do.
Right.
I stretch, we might take deep breaths. I think about heart math, right? What else would you say is on that list for you?
Well, definitely still point in the 5 skills of self-care. And I've got other tools, but I do want to shout out those 5 skills of self-care.
Yes.
I would say in conjunction with that, Sheila and I have been doing a group every Tuesday
Mhm.
since online through a platform called Let's Reimagine. And I want to give this as a resource to our listeners, because it is a platform. And in fact, I'm going to pull it up, Shannon, because they
Yes.
changed their tagline recently.
Okay.
And I was reading it to somebody just the other day, and I was like, ooh, that was good. So let's reimagine loss, adversity, and mortality, and channel life's challenges into meaning and growth. And so what they do is they host, it's an online platform that hosts a variety of events where, and they usually range for, a lot of them are free. They have sliding scales. They have a video library of powering, inspiring moments from virtual events that they've done, like candlelight vigils and
Beautiful.
around grief. And it's just powerful. So Sheila and I co-host a class on there every Tuesday called Radical Self and Community Care based on Still Point.
Yes.
And we were just talking about those 5 skills of self care the other day. And I was thinking about it in relation to grief,
Mhm.
especially because the original story was based, or where they came out of was the myth of Psyche, and how she was given an impossible task, or several impossible tasks.
Sheila
And
was.
Psyche was in the
Psyche
Greek
was.
myth. Yeah.
Mhm.
So she and so that's where it's all talked about in the book. But
It's a good book.
thank you. The 5 skills of self-care, the first one is sorting and separating what belongs to us from what belongs to others. So especially when we're grieving, right? That's a big one,
Mhm.
because it's often that emotions overflow, or that there's a lot of drama, especially if it's around death, or if
Mhm.
it's around big grief, right? And
Yes.
so sometimes we can get confused about what's ours and what's somebody else. Like, did I do that? Or, so that sorting and separating, does
Mm.
it belong to me or does it belong to somebody else, right?
Yes,
I
yes.
think it's crucial. And
Yes,
that's one, sometimes, especially as people who are caring and people who are like, we care, we're listening to the stories.
yes.
Sometimes it's one to take a deep breath and step back and check in with ourselves about. So,
Mhm.
number one, skill of self care, sorting and separating. Number two, letting go and surrendering, and learning when and how to do this. So, folks that believe in a higher power, folks that, have been engaged with Al Anon or 12 steps,
Mhm.
that surrendering to a higher power, that a lot of times we can't control what's happening, right? Especially when we think about grief and we think about, often when we talk about grief, people immediately go to death, right? But there's
Right.
other types of grief, but a
Definitely.
lot of them we don't get to control, right?
Right.
you know?
We would
So
prevent
that,
it. Right.
right? That letting go and separate and surrendering and
Mhm.
learning when and how to do this, right? Number three, skill of self care is building and using partnership power to get help from others. One of my all time favorites, one of my tools that I use all the time, and that we can get support. Like, I think you get support in your regular life, and then
Yes.
when things like this happen, you've already built up that partnership power, and you're able to not have to do it by yourself, right?
So can we talk about that a little bit? And we'll
Sure,
go into all of them, right? Because I have more
sure.
time with you today. But I think that's so important, right? Because when you are grieving, now I would consider it heavier, right? Now you have a difficult situation to walk through. And I think that this is where people get upset, right? And I've seen a lot of
Mhm,
things on friendships like if somebody's not showing up for you how you show up for them, then you need to cut them off and things like that. Well, we talk
mhm,
about pouring into a relationship. I think it's really important to make sure that we're making deposits and showing up for people or communicating through great
mhm.
times and on a normal basis. And then, like you're saying, is clearly solidified and understood that you are one of my people when this happens. I think that would
Right,
help,
right,
knowing and being able to trust that you have that support in place.
right. Well, and what I really found out last year, which was, it's probably one of the toughest years I've ever had.
Mhm.
And we all have a limit and a capacity. And we all there's a point that we get to, and everybody's is different, right?
Right.
People look at my schedule and they're like, oh my gosh, I couldn't do
Right.
that, right?
Right, right,
But everybody has a point or a limit or capacity where they just can't take anymore, or they
right.
can't do anymore, or they
Mhm.
can't. And so when I think about what you just said, that about friendships,
Mhm.
because I think I've shared it with listeners before. A couple of years ago, I started calling in healthy and reciprocal friendships.
Yes.
Healthy and reciprocal friendships.
It's important.
Well, as a friend to myself, there was a lot that I couldn't reciprocate on last year.
Yes.
I just didn't have the capacity because I was
Right.
busy caregiving and I was busy taking care of the business of people dying. And because it
Yes.
is a business,
It
especially in
is.
our country, and there's
I
things you
love it.
have to do that are
Right.
legal, and you know, and so I think I lost my train of thought about where I was
I got
going
you.
with it.
You were talking
Yeah,
about reciprocal friendships and how last year, because of everything, you
right,
couldn't reciprocate evenly.
right. And I think that, so I want to be really clear with our listeners. I believe in reciprocity
Mhm.
and at times of intense grief, sometimes it's just not possible. Like, you really go into survival mode.
Mhm. And I think it's at times of intense grief, right? With varied levels of responsibility, right?
Hmm.
Now at 30 years old, I have friends who have children, friends who don't. I can't
Hmm.
I feel like as a healthy friend, I'm not going to be upset if you have to please take care of your children. I'm not going to say, "Oh, I showed up for you. You got to." No, you have to be realistic with the capacity and the context of the situation and then move from there.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's important, and to not, I had to be really kind to myself through this process,
Mhm.
because if you are the person that usually is the one doing, or you're the one
Showing
that
up,
is right,
and
that
you do.
if you come to the point that you can't, it's
Right.
okay to be gentle with yourself. I think
Yes.
about that, and
Yes.
having that community support to
Right.
rest and do what you need to do, right?
And it's that part, the do what you need to do. right?
Mhm.
Because even now with my friend, and I have godchildren, right? I would love to see them once a week and do all this stuff. And I had to look at my schedule and my capacity, stepping out from
Mhm.
a salary position, right? The listeners know, and into the three businesses this year. Like, wow, why am I not seeing certain people how I would like to? And oh, I because I have to take care of myself first. I have to make sure that the needs are met. So is it healthy to have extra social time, or pouring out money and resources and different things at certain places? I think that in the Black community, what I've found is that sometimes you want to show up, but you do not have what you need to be able to show up for that other person. And so
Right?
sometimes it's taken personally, but we have to look at where people are and say if they're doing their best, if they gave 30%, they have 30%, then they gave 100% of everything
100%
they
that
had.
day.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
Hmm.
Absolutely.
Hmm.
And that's why I think I said that earlier about people are different on the scale and their
Absolutely.
capacity. And I
Yeah.
think that the big thing is, checking in with
Yeah.
yourself and your people.
Because it
And
moves.
Dr. Laura says, I have to remind people that grief is physically depleting. That, yes, it's often
Yes.
it's a surprise to them, right?
Yes.
It's exhausting,
Yes.
right?
And so
It's
I loved watching you last year, Christine, and how you were transparent about I have to give myself grace and
right.
be compassionate with myself because you are amazing. Moment
Oh,
aside,
thank you.
amazing at showing up, you know? So if you're stretched, then that makes sense. And then when you're tired, sometimes we beat ourselves up for being lazy or not being as productive, but
Right.
rest is part of productivity. We have to take that still point because again, this book, y'all, this is it's not us just trying to be nice about it. It literally affects our immune system and then we get sick. Caregivers are affected by doing all this stuff, so we have to rest, right?
Absolutely. I
What is
love what Laura is saying
Yeah,
in
let's
the
go.
comments. Be excessively gentle with yourself is one of
Yeah.
my favorite lines from poet John O'Donohue. Ooh, we're
Mm,
going to put that in the show notes, Laura.
be
Thank you.
excessively gentle with yourself. Yes.
I think especially as women, like we're just so used to going and doing and even in grief. And Laura, what your thing about it being physically tiring, I think about my dad's currently in the hospital
Mm,
and my mom's exhausted.
yeah.
And she's like, I don't know why I'm exhausted. And I was thinking about some of it is probably preemptive grief.
Mm,
Like in the stage of life he's in and where he's at.
yes.
And it, and I know when I go to the hospital, I get exhausted, right? And I
Yeah.
hadn't tied it to the grief. I tend to tie it with the energies of the place, but it absolutely could be tied to the grief too.
And not only preemptive, but, the work that you've done for years leading up to it.
Hmm.
You know what I
Hmm.
mean? The grief of the situation that is now to even get where they are is
Right.
a transition from another environment and a way of operating that they've been used to for decades. So that is real and now, and then on top of that, everything else. So that makes sense.
Right. It
Yes.
does make sense.
Yeah.
Well, and just I also think, we were talking last week on the podcast about like I was feeling great and I was
Yeah.
like, you know, catching up with yourselves because I think the other thing that people forget in grief is that it is physically and mentally exhausting and there's a lot to do around it.
Mhm.
And then the other thing is often you're out of your regular routine, right?
Right.
Whether you're at the hospital or you're dealing with estates or you're, holding space for people who are grieving. So you
Mm,
get out of your regular routines and some different things slip or
mhm, mhm.
know, you're just like, you got to catch up with yourself, right?
Yes.
That's that piece of it too. It's like, oh, yeah, this
Yeah.
happened. I was talking with a friend this week who went through a divorce this year,
Wow.
and they looked up and their house insurance was not it had lapsed because their
Mm,
partner was the one that usually paid for it. Their
got
partner
it.
moved out and it wasn't malicious or anything like that. It just kind of fell through the
Easy.
cracks.
Easy to do.
And
Yes.
and it was they started to beat themselves up and they caught themselves, right? And we're like,
Good.
and I was like, I just also need to point out that that's a part you were in deep grief and loss during this
Mhm,
time. And
mhm.
so I like Laura said, be excessively gentle with
Excessively
yourself.
gentle.
Excessively.
And
I
in
like
those
that.
seasons, it's a win to see that you caught it. It's a win to
Right?
say, "Okay, this happened this year. Now we know better for next year." You're winning.
Right,
Yes.
right.
Yes.
And getting that support. I'm gonna circle us back around to the 5 skills of
The steps. Where
self-care,
we on step
and
4, right?
we're on step 4. Yeah, stepping back to see the big picture and the relationship between the parts. So just what we were talking about with the example of the divorce and the grief and loss, and to catch it, right? You step
Yes.
back and you give yourself perspective.
Yes.
And I think sometimes, oh, thank you, Laura. Laura posted the here's the whole poem that comes for one who is exhausted, a blessing. Oh,
Yes. Thank you.
we'll put that in our show notes, and we'll also, I think I may have to tuck that in my suitcase.
No, really. I'm gonna read it. It might be a LinkedIn article, it might be a couple of threads.
Right,
Yes.
right. I love that. So number 5 skill of self-care is exercising choice by
Mm,
saying no and yes. And, that to me is one of the most challenging ones because y'all know I like to say yes. I'm like, oh, I like to do things, I like to do it. But really, as a skill of self care, and especially if you are going through grief, like
mhm.
you got to have good boundaries so you can take care of yourself,
Yeah.
so you can prioritize yourself. And it's not selfish to do that.
No.
I was telling Shannon before the show that she inspired me. I Because of all the travel and different funerals and places I had to go last year, I missed my regular physical, and I knew it was due. And it's like it's one of those things that you're like, oh, I got to make that schedule, right?
Mhm.
And then very long story short, I need a medication renewed. So I'm like, they're like, you have to come in, Christine. You
Mhm.
cannot keep rescheduling. I'm like, well, of course I do. I believe in the 8 dimensions of wellness. Get your butt
Right.
to the doctor.
You got
So
this.
this was a new doctor's office today, and the nurse had tattooed on her arm, "Love yourself first."
Mhm.
And I was like, "Ooh, I like your ink." And she's like, "I stand by it." And I was like, "I love it." Like, and it was right there for her to see, right?
Right.
I was
Yes.
like, "Love yourself first." Let's see. I want to lift up what Sammy Nicole and the Fifi show is saying. They're saying, yes, I totally agree. Oh, I lost my mom last week, and sometimes the grief is unbearable. Oh, I'm so
Sorry
sorry,
to hear
Fifi.
that. Yes.
Yeah,
Never easy.
yeah.
So let's read it for the listeners. She shared, yes, I totally agree. I lost my mom last week, and sometime the grief is unbearable. Sammy and I are just trying to maintain being there, taking care of my mom to the end. I needed this, ladies. Thanks. You are so
Mm,
welcome, Fifi. Absolutely. And this is what I think about, with Women Connected in Wisdom. I think about when my mom passed away, and I feel like ever since then, it's been like mother figure, mother figure, mother figure, mother figure. Like even with the partnership power I was thinking about when my mom passed away, and I didn't know
mhm,
what to do, what resources, like, not being connected to my family at all, this had never
mhm,
happened. I had never had a close family member pass away because I didn't know any of them except for my dad, right? And thankfully, he survived cancer. And so I was, spinning, trying to figure out what to do, right? And
mhm,
Linda, my upline in Neora, the network marketing company I was part of, she said, "Stop what you're doing. Let me call some people, and she called somebody who had a resource and was able to get me connected. And since then, Linda's passed away, And so when I
mhm.
think about those things, it's like just taking a second, being there when we can, like you ladies were there for your mom. So glad you were able to be there. And now being able to take care of yourself to continue on.
Right?
Yeah.
Whew, yeah.
Yeah.
It's real. I was talking to somebody the other day, and I shared something about last year, and they were like, everybody I know is going through this.
Yes.
And everybody I know is going through like 3 to 5 major things,
Yes.
right? And so it's like, okay. And I know we've talked about it a little on the show before, but I used to say I hold both the grief and the gratitude. And
Mhm.
I've changed my language from that.
I
I
love
want
it.
to say now that I acknowledge both the grief and the gratitude because I don't want to hold it in my body. Like
No.
it's This grief is too big for one body to hold, right?
Yes.
And the grief of the world and the grief of like it just, whew, it's
Continues
like
to
trying to
occur.
hold an ocean. It doesn't
Yes.
work, right?
Yes.
So I think, but we want to acknowledge it. We want to acknowledge that there are tools, there are things. I think circling back to your original question, what are the tools, right?
Yes,
I
yes.
said still point in the 5 skills of self care. Interplay, huge
Mhm.
tool for me. Using
Mm,
the arts,
yes.
using a way to tell stories. When my Aunt Joan passed last year, which
Mhm.
was such a big deal for me,
Yes.
um, I did a Interplay Secrets weekend. I was co-leading a couple of months later, and they invited me to tell a story. And to be able to tell a big body story, like to tell the richness of what she meant to me, right? And how she impacts my life today, and the person I am. The honoring in that way. Often we get to do it at memorial services or celebrations of life, but then often people don't continue to have the conversations and talk about it.
Mhm.
And so I know you and I do a lot on the podcast. We'll mention this person or that person.
Absolutely.
But I think it's important, right? How do we use the arts to heal?
Mhm.
Our friend and author, Dr. Sheila K. Collins, who is one of our volume one best-selling authors, she has
Yes.
a new book coming out,
Mhm.
and it's called The Art of Grieving, and how the arts, and I'm going to get her subtitle wrong. Let me look up her subtitle.
Yeah,
But
let's look
she
it
is
up.
also doing a class on the Reimagine platform that I was telling you about.
Yes.
And you can attend that class and check it out. And I'm going to tell y'all when that is, because I think that's coming up in March. And we'll tag folks on the show notes too with her. The Art of Grieving, how the arts and art making. Oh, I don't know if it's big enough. Let me see. How the arts and art making help us grieve and live our best lives.
Mhm.
So how they help us thrive, you know?
So
Yeah.
important. So important.
Yeah.
So, and what I think about, is how unorganized I felt in that time, right? Again, not knowing what to do, not having the resources, not feeling like I had the resources. And that's what Women Connected in Wisdom is about, connecting people to the resources when they know they need them. Where do I go? Look at the list depending on the dimension, right?
Hmm.
But for me, it was really the habits. Okay, I need to stop myself from spinning, right? How do I stop and gather myself now as a new person, a different person than I was on the other side of this event? And what do I need to do? Right? What are the basic things that I need to have in my daily routine, my weekly routine, my monthly routine to set this rhythm up? And that is where the inspiration for my chapter in volume 2 came from, the intellectual wellness and how to maximize your capacity, right? It's not just about doing more. Sometimes in seasons like this, we won't be doing a lot. Like Sula shared in volume 2 is sometimes it's just the basic
Right?
things, right?
Self care
Brushing
is an
teeth.
all time job.
Oof, I love her chapter, right? Making your bed, eating breakfast, or eating during the day in general, How do we make sure that that's in our repertoire so that we can consistently make sure we're well taken care of? We're wise, we're whole, we're well, right? Be wise, be whole, be well. Did I say that right? We have everything we need, right? How do we do that and still be like, okay, I'm going to go to this homegoing celebration tomorrow? And
Hmm.
try to stay
Hmm.
centered through everything because we don't always get breaks in between. We come out of the homegoing ceremony and then here's something else. So
Right?
how do we maintain our wellness?
What are some of the tools you use?
Mm. So you were talking about interplay and it reminded me of what do I do physically, right? Definitely Shalo Glow. And that's huge for me because reading your book showed me how caregivers can be overextended. And when I read it, I'm literally thinking about somebody picking up somebody and putting them in the shower, literally taking care of physical bodies, right? So me taking care of my physical body on a daily basis and coming back home, checking. I started doing my joints again. I got out of the habit, but Shayla go on my ankles, my knees, my waist, my spine, my elbows, my wrists, just taking that time with myself, staying on top of my workout regimen. We're talking about emotional and mental wellness today. And when I'm not working out, I do get upset a little bit quicker or my attitude is not as good. And you know what I mean? So we don't want that. We don't want that version of Shannon. So keeping that on the schedule.
I always say 3 days.
Mm,
I have 3 days of grace and then I get funky.
Oh, okay.
So I got to be walking, I got to be
Mm.
running, I got to be doing something active
Mm.
because, you know,
It's probably about the same time. Like,
right?
if it goes too long, then, yeah, I need to get outside or, yeah, be walking. And,
Mhm.
what else do I do? Journaling, because I'm long-winded. I know we have podcasts and keynote speakers, and so we get our words out, but there's more details. So I get to put all my details down and really work through just processing it, when I see it written down.
Mhm.
And again, going through this experience with my mom passing showed me that, because I was so unorganized. I was writing on a huge calendar, like a table-sized calendar, and it wasn't in the lines, it wasn't organized, some of it didn't make sense. And for me, that is not how I usually
That's
am,
not how you roll.
at
Yeah.
all. So writing it down and organizing my time so I'm not overwhelmed when people do need help, when different things do pull me and things do move. I can say, okay, well, Wednesday we had this planned, I'll move this block of time to this, and it helps me um mitigate and step through the transitions as things change.
Right. And for our live listeners, if you want to share with us, you can put in the
Please.
comments, like, what are your tools? What do you
Yes.
do to live and thrive with grief? Like,
Hmm.
what's your go-to?
Yes.
Um, I think tactily and physically,
Hmm.
like I like soft, squishy clothes.
Yeah.
So I know that the more sensitive I am, whether that's emotional or mental or, needing that comfort,
Hmm.
I'm really conscious of what I put on, right?
Yes.
And when I packed to go where I know there may be grief going on, I'm
Hmm.
conscious of what I'm packing to bring myself comfort, right?
Hmm.
um, because I think it's part of it's important, right? Knowing ourselves, what's going to help us rest, what's going to help us feel good and look good, but also be comforted.
Yeah.
So
And the last thing you wanna do is know that you're going somewhere in a situation where it might be a lot, and then you
mm,
have on this dress with the tulle under it, and you're highly uncomfortable sitting on this when we could have been more intentional, you know?
right,
Yeah.
right,
I think this is tripping against the mic. But and then I
right.
would say prayer too, like letting go of those things. Like, I'm so glad I'm not responsible for fingerprints and the grains of sand over here in this country and war, and I don't, this not my responsibility. This is
Mhm,
in my sphere of influence, and the rest I can put down and pray over it. And that's how I feel better to let it go.
mm.
And something that came up earlier was something that I learned doing the human design. I went and looked at my chart and looked at all the stuff, right? It was
Oh,
really good. We gotta talk about it.
okay.
And it says to not be a sponge, but to be a
Mm,
screen. And I love that, right? Because intellectually, as a nerd, I would definitely have considered myself a sponge, somebody who soaks up information here and there. But when we're talking about information like this, that can get heavy. So
right,
be an empathetic person, be a screen. You can listen and hold space for somebody, but you don't have to pull it like water and hold it right here. You can let it flow and go with the flow, like we were
right,
talking about earlier.
right. Oh, I have to show you. Hang on. I think I showed you earlier, but I'm going to show our listeners that are watching,
Yes.
and I'll describe it for the folks that aren't. So I pulled a card out of the Wisdom of the Divine Feminine deck, which
Yes.
was gifted to me by our friend Melody, who's one
Mhm.
of our volume one authors. I
Yes.
had taken a class with her, and she gifted me this deck that was by Jenny Hahn and Jessica Richetti out
Mhm.
of Asheville. They're local artists and folks there. And this week I pulled this card and it said flow. And it's got this beautiful spiral on it with pink and green and blue and
It's
purple, and it was just beautiful because it was the reminder of we don't always get to we don't always get to choose what happens to us, right?
right.
But we can choose our reaction to it.
Mhm.
And they wrote with this card, I step into the flow and let myself be moved. I honor the nature of movement and flow. And they said there's a whole 2 pages. I highly recommend this. But what they asked us to contemplate on when we talk about flow is how do I best access flow, like movement, song, creation, etc. What energy do I notice is flowing that I am resisting?
Mm,
Isn't that a great question?
important to notice.
And then how can I deepen into flow when the currents are there?
I
So it
love
was, yeah, I love, they always give a little insight. They give some questions and they give an activity to do to play with the word or what they've brought up.
yes.
So I thought it was interesting that we were talking about flow today
Yeah.
because I think that it's powerful. All right, Dr. Laura has some stuff in there. We're going to lift it
Yes. Let's
up.
see. Yes.
Let's do it.
Helping others, if slash when we have the energy, yes,
Mhm.
right, can make it easier to move through grief, probably later in the process. Several months after my mom died, I hosted a comfort brunch for everyone who provided comfort during the process. I love that. I made and served each person's favorite comfort food as a way to thank them. Wow, Dr. Laura, super thoughtful.
What a great ritual.
I love it. And
Oh my
yes,
gosh.
yes, a little bit, probably later in the process, right? The
Mhm.
the day my mom passed away, I went to church, and I told you that prayer helps, right? Being For me, being poured into is really important. That's something else,
Mhm.
right? Pouring heavy on the self-care and making sure that I'm poured into. So I went to church, and I also went because it was my first day serving as one of the greeters at the young adults ministry, and I was serving as the ministry. We had meetings, and I was doing all this stuff, and after a couple weeks, I said, I need to stop. I need to stop going to stuff. Like, that was a day where it would have been okay if I wasn't at church. The greeters would have been fine. Everybody would have been fine. And maybe it was the best place for me to be that night. We
Mhm.
trust that everything happens for a reason. But I love, Dr. Laura, what you're saying. And absolutely, thanking them for being there,
Mm.
making sure that you honor them, but first making sure that you're okay, that you have the energy, and then going back to, being an active, intentional part of your community.
I love that detail of serving each person's favorite comfort food. What's your favorite comfort food, Shannon?
Oh, that's a great question. I don't know if I know, which is funny. What came up was bread. Bread.
That's okay. It's a
Yeah,
category. It's
as a
not even.
category, right? I don't know. I've been so disciplined and so good at
Mhm.
no, no. I have a list of things that I say I love it, but they don't love me, right? So maybe something on that list. I would have to think about it. What about you?
Right? Well, what bubbled up for me is mashed potatoes and gluten-free. I like air fried baked chicken, or
Mm,
but the pseudo fried chicken.
okay.
Oh, actually, I hear I'm gonna name it.
Yeah.
Um, Early Girl Cafe in Asheville
Mhm,
has a gluten-free fried chicken with mashed potatoes and
mhm.
string green beans that is so comforting. Like I even as I started to describe it, my mouth started.
It sounds good.
And it's a good thing we don't hear from here in Atlanta. It's a good thing, like, it's great. I'd have been living there last year. Dr. Laura, we'd love to hear what your comfort food is too. And
Yes.
Fifi, if you're still with us, we'd love to hear what your comfort food is.
Let us know.
I'm always fascinated by and what brings us comfort, right?
Yeah. Maybe
And that
it's
it's
chips. I
okay.
love chips.
It's okay to give ourselves comfort, right?
Yes. Yeah.
I mean, you don't want to get in the habit of doing it all the time, but especially if could be if
Yeah.
carrots are your comfort, right?
Right. And that's what I've been working on, like, as I was vegan for the majority of 1 year and I lost all this weight and have kept it off, right? It's, okay, what do you love? Be honest about it. You love Oreos, you love spicy pickles, what is it that you love, right? And then how can you make it healthier? So I do like air fried chips, we try to do the healthier chips, even though sometimes it's like, this is not what I want, but
Okay, stop the presses. Can
okay,
I tell you something I made in the can I we do a total left comfort food
let's do it. What'd you make?
recipe on the air?
I love a good recipe.
Um, so I found it on Instagram, and you take the rice papers, which I actually have some in my office. Isn't that hysterical? Embarrassing that I have them on my office table. You know, But you take the rice papers,
Okay.
right?
Yes.
And then you soften them because they come dry. And
Mhm.
then you put your fillings in. So they were recommending like shrimp and garlic chives
I
and
think I
some,
saw this.
right? And
Mhm.
then you fold it up and you put it in the air fryer. You may have, because I may have sent it to you, right?
Mm.
And then it's only like 10 minutes in the air fryer, and then they
Yeah.
crisp up and they are crunchy, and they, I was like, new, right?
New favorite.
Um, Dr. Laura says, I surveyed people on Facebook, and everyone's comfort food had some
Mm.
sort of milk in it.
Mm.
That's fascinating,
That is interesting.
right? Oh, you think about that and you think about the ties as mammals to our mothers and milk and whoa.
Is that what okay, so you went there, I went to that's why it's so hard for everybody to get off dairy and cheese and meat and bread because it's what they're putting in the food. Ah, but you did say mashed potatoes, and I thought about
I
mashed potatoes.
did,
Mashed potatoes
right?
are good. They're amazing.
Right? They
Hmm.
to me are like a warm and it's got to be the good ones, right? It's got to be
Yeah,
the ones that you boil and
yeah.
you like you walk it through, you do the
Mhm.
mixer.
Yeah,
Like we're not taking any shortcuts if it's
right,
true comfort, but
right.
yeah. I That's so fascinating. Everyone's comfort food had some sort of milk in it.
And I love that you're that intentional. I was thinking even if I did do a brunch, would I do everybody's favorite? I feel like it's one meal. I feel like that's the mom I'm gonna be like, "This is what we're eating. I'm not making multiple meals for people." Like,
I hope
you know
your comfort and your comfort. Well, I mean, now Dr. Lori's given us a little bit of a cheat because if we
Uh-huh.
serve something with milk in it, it's going to have the odds of hitting.
Right.
It's going to hit somebody's, right?
Mhm. And I even like a Facebook survey, you made it easy to
Right,
collect the information. I like it. I like
right.
it.
That is
And
fascinating to me.
mm,
I love figuring out things with people, right?
yeah,
Like, I'm just like, I got to do some more research on that now, Dr. Laura. I got to figure out,
it's probably a thing.
right? Well, and really, like, is it a biological imperative? We're going to have to ask our friend Dr. Andrew Huberman over there at the Huberman Lab in Stanford if he will do a little research on this because
I
he
wanna know.
researches all kinds of stuff like this.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm trying to substitute it. I was thinking about oat milk and you earlier, some almond milk, oat milk. What do we
I
think?
substitute oat milk all the time.
Mhm.
That's my go to. Um, and psychologically it has the same comfort for me. I'm
Mhm.
curious about that's where, do you remember the game shows? And I mean, they used to do scientific tests on them too, but where you do the blind taste testing. Now
Mm,
it makes me want to set up mashed potatoes with real
mm.
milk, almond, oat milk, and see
Would love some good research.
which one brings me the most comfort.
Mm. And that's the thing, like, when I and so you guys know, when I do the healthy stuff, I do try to stay away from the other stuff. If you're trying to eat veggie straws and then you go to Doritos is gonna be better every time, of course, you know what I mean?
But
Like,
not for me. Oh
no?
no. No, no, no,
Okay.
no. Well, if they're the cheesy, I don't do the fake flavors.
Okay.
Like see, I gotta cringe. Like I can't. So like I'll take a veggie straw any day over a
And they're
Dorito.
delicious. And when I
Yeah.
found out about these, is it like some chemical? They're off the list, so I love them, but they don't love me. That's the list that they're on now. But
Right.
what about
We have
Thrive?
totally devolved from emotional and mental well,
No,
Doritos kind of go with emotional and mental
no, it
wellness.
it goes with it. It goes with it, right? So let's get back though. So we're talking about living and thriving with grief, right? We've
Mhm.
talked about tools that we use in difficult situations. What about thriving?
Yeah.
Are there specific things that you do to set yourself up for success in order to thrive?
Well, I think the calendaring the
Mhm,
self-care,
mhm.
especially in times of grief.
Yeah.
Like and not, I mean, I want to say society's judgment sometimes, right?
What do
I
you mean?
think sometimes, well, I think about, I went to the spa last year a record number of times. Like I went, I think 6 times in the year, which, we are here in Atlanta and we're really lucky and privileged to have incredible Korean spas that are
Beautiful.
incredibly inexpensive and you can
Yes.
go and have a day. But when I was looking at my calendar, when I was collecting the wins for last year and things like that was one of my wins. I was
Yes.
like, "What?" And then I had that thought, I had that, "Oh, wow, how did I manage that in the midst of all of this?"
Mhm.
And and I guess that's what was popping up for me is, I think sometimes when people know we're grieving or they know something big has happened,
Mhm.
to not let the "oh, you should" or "you should not" things happen. Like, do calendar what is truly self-care for you.
Mhm.
Calendar what is going to bring you comfort and bring you back into wellness,
Yes.
and take care of yourself, right?
Yeah.
Um, and one of my tricks, this is basic self-care, but it's huge when I'm grieving, is partnership power
That's what I
and
was gonna say.
scheduling a walk with somebody.
Mhm.
It's, because that and our long-term listeners know I love romance books, and it's one of my comforts. It's one of my go-tos. I'm
Yes.
always reading one. So I laughed last year, and I was like, it's a miracle I didn't have the vapors and just go to the bed,
The
because the Victorian romances where they always got the vapors and they went to bed.
Mhm.
Um,
Mm.
and I
Um,
think about that, and I was like, but why I didn't was because I calendared things.
mhm.
And I let myself have time where I just was in bed with the covers pulled over my head,
Yes.
but that doesn't work very well for my system. Like, I
Agreed.
can do that for a day and then
Mhm.
I get funky. And
Mhm.
so I calendar where I have to get out of the house, even if
Okay.
it's for a short amount of time.
Mhm.
And I always say, pick your friends well in that moment. Like, you're gonna know what you need. Like,
Mm.
in times, and for me, it's always different. It depends on the level of grief. Like, sometimes I want to talk about it, and sometimes I don't. I'm not
Right.
ready to, right?
Right.
So I might pick a friend that doesn't really talk much during our walks,
Mhm.
or maybe I pick one who does all the talking, and I don't have
Mhm.
to say anything,
Mhm.
right? So, kind of knowing yourself and what you need in that moment, I think is important, and allowing yourself to have it.
Yeah. And that's what I was gonna say. Yes, you went a record number of times, right? But I think you shared last week, it was when people were here, right? So you had people from out of town, they got to enjoy it. You got to
Yep,
partner, you got to pair your social interaction and your self-care. You
right,
love doing that. So it makes
right.
sense. And I
Well,
would say,
one of the gigs, I have to say, I don't know if
mm,
it was last year or the year before, it was actually I got paid to do it because I was opening a wellness retreat at the
mhm.
spa. I was like, "What? Is this real life? You're paying me to come to the spa?"
Maybe that's where we have the Women Connected in Wisdom retreat at a spa.
Absolutely. Available to be hired to come open your wellness retreat at the
Right.
spa. You
Open to
name it,
work, right?
I will open open to work for retreats at the spa. We'll
Yeah,
travel for them also,
we will.
like
Absolutely. And I think about the same thing, partnership power. I'm
Mhm,
big on being introspective, right? Am I looking at this correctly? Or um, maybe if it is a part that I'm having difficulty with, just talking it through with somebody, So, like you said, being intentional about who's there in that moment and sharing time. We've been talking about it, spending time with our people, checking in, especially if it's around time of grief, not knowing how long or short life is. Like, let's go ahead and get those moments in. And of course, that's after I've poured into myself and made sure that I'm okay to be around, that I've done what I can for myself, and then, go in, enjoy my amazing community who supports and is that mirror, and that is what came up around um, your partnership power in the 5 steps we went into
mhm,
earlier for my friends who have also changed household dynamics and taking care of children and support is different. Like, well, wait a minute, you want to show up, but you have shown up. You were at the book signing, you were at my birthday, you did this, you did that, you did amazing. And being excessively, or what she say, extremely gentle with ourselves.
right?
Um, also helps me set myself up to thrive, through difficult situations.
Mm, yeah. And I think that reaching out for help if you need it too,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
I have to give a shout out, right? I'm a big believer in therapy. So
Yes.
that's a tool.
Mhm.
Having that, having my people I can reach out to and cry on
Yeah.
their shoulders or
Yeah.
laugh with, right? That's one of my
Yes.
tools
Yes.
is
Laughter.
intentionally laughing and
Mhm.
finding things to laugh about, right? In the
Yes.
midst of big stuff. But Yeah, I'm so grateful. And, I've, of course, so grateful for you and your partnership and,
Thank you.
us just thriving in the
Yeah.
midst of big stuff.
Mhm.
So I can't believe we are almost to this time, but
Yes.
wisdom in action. When you
Mm.
think about emotional and mental wellness and you think about living and thriving with grief,
Mhm.
what's your wisdom in action this week?
So, what I wrote down at the beginning was channeling challenges into meaning and growth, right? And it
Mm,
reminded me of Tracy Reese's chapter in volume 1, and she shared about post-traumatic growth.
mhm.
And I don't know if it could be a skill, but I think I'm really good at it, you know? So, because there's been a lot, right? So just channeling the challenges, because things are going to happen. And
Right?
instead of getting upset about it, instead of fighting against it, like that fish not trying to go with the flow, to go with the flow and let yourself transition into the new step and the new place that you are and learn the lessons and use it to your benefit. That's what I'm thinking about. So I'll say hashtag channel challenges.
Mm.
Mhm.
I am going to have two this week. I'm going to
Okay.
hashtag flow for
Mhm.
go with the flow,
I love it.
and I'm going to hashtag laugh more.
Yes. And shout out to you last week. I've been thinking about it all week. You were laughing so much. And you were also intentionally like, I love that we did this, we did that, we did this. And you
Right.
were bringing up all this stuff that you enjoyed. And it's important to have difficult conversations. And it's also important to highlight the great parts and the laugh and to have joy and everything. So I love that.
Right?
Laugh more.
I really am just so grateful. Another tool
Mhm.
I know we've dropped a lot of resources this show, so our show
Yeah.
notes are going to be full. But our author Cecile Armstrong in volume 1 and volume 2,
Mhm.
from Everyday Activism Habit, she introduced me to an app called Dailyo,
Mhm.
and it is where you can track, like, and especially when I think about when you're going through challenging times,
Mhm.
you, like, it tracks, and one of my goals is to laugh every day, so I get to check off that I laughed, right? And if I didn't, I check in with myself and think, what was
Mhm.
going on, or what do I need to make me laugh, or what do I need to seek out?
Yes.
um, and so I think an app or something that tracks, especially if you're in the midst of it, I think is a really good
I
thing.
love
We
that.
have so many tools at our fingertips right now.
Yes,
It
we
is
do.
incredible.
Yeah.
And not to negate the human connection and the partnership power, but we do have some apps that can partner with us, right?
Yeah,
Which is
and that
cool,
that helps you check in with yourself, and
right?
I've shared about how laughter definitely helped me past tense and helps me not say or not be
That's
depressed.
right. Your goal.
Mhm,
Tell our new listeners
mhm.
what age
So
you were.
I was like 11, so this is in middle school, y'all, right? And this is from different houses. What was this, like, the 2nd this was the first in between the first and second divorce my dad is going through, right? And it was just a lot. I said, "Why am I depressed?" I was checking in with myself and noticing that I was down. I said, "You know what? My goal is to laugh at least once a day, whether it's different, having to pull up a video if I get home and realize I didn't laugh, intentionally making myself laugh." And it eventually became easier throughout the day. And they would have to stop me from laughing, like, "Shannon, it's not that funny." Well, I'm gonna keep on laughing until I'm done.
Oh, you know where I used to get in trouble with that all the time?
Where
'Cause, I've been an athlete since I was probably 6th grade. I would get in
yes.
trouble all the time with my coaches for laughing.
Really?
Because then they'd make it harder because we were
Why?
supposed to be having fun. We're supposed to
Mm-mm.
be like, and I'm like, y'all, this is just what I do. Like, I'm
Right.
gonna laugh, and especially the more challenging it gets, the more I'm gonna look for something to laugh about because I'm trying
Absolutely.
to get through it, right?
Yes.
So, yeah, I get in trouble sometimes with coaches and trainers around
Mm-mm.
my attitude.
I second that motion. I second the laughter through the challenges. I like it. It's important.
Right? Well, you totally inspired my daily goal of to
Yeah,
laugh every day. Your
yeah.
11-year-old's like, I am so damn impressed with her. So,
Thank you.
yeah,
Yes. Yes, and
very
you've been
cool.
doing great.
You
And
too,
bef
my friend.
thank you. And before we go, we've talked about knowing that there's been 3 to 5 challenges, looking at the COVID numbers just from the holiday season, 10,000 people, seeing the stories of where we are in the world, where we are in workplaces, where we are with families that need help across the United States. We were talking about this article and seeing that people are staying in the airport. If you are struggling, you're like, I'm not okay. Sometimes that's exactly where you should be. That
Right?
shows that you were paying attention. And I just want to offer hope and encouragement that, it's okay to feel that way if things are difficult, to allow
Right.
yourself to feel it, allow yourself to process it, and then to check in with some of these tools, whether it's laughter, which is free, thank God, whether it's therapy that you can find on a sliding scale, you can find it for
Mm.
free, you can go through insurance, whether it's building up that support system around yourself, tap into those tools that can help you transition to the next phase of the season and not get stuck there. But it's okay to feel that way.
Well, it's going out in the sunshine.
Hmm.
Because seasonal affective disorder is real, and
It's a
especially
thing.
this time of year. I saw
Mhm.
somebody posting about it on Facebook, and with it, we're gloomy in Atlanta this week, and they were
Yeah.
talking about so getting that sunshine bulb, or
Right.
if the sun is shining, taking a break from the computer and going out. I
Yes.
think so many resources, so many things. And, we're going to be talking about a lot of this in the upcoming summit with the 8 Dimensions of Wellness and our
Yes.
volume 2 authors. You
Hmm.
want to give our listeners the date and how they can get
Yes.
hooked up with that?
Yeah, so you guys can find all the information for our upcoming events on our website, womenconnectedinwisdom.com. And this second annual online summit is going to be February 23rd and the 24th. Again, these are going to be our amazing authors and narrators for Volume 2. We mentioned some of them today, and you guys have seen them on the show if you've been following. If not, go back and check out some of their stuff so you know what they're going to be talking about, so you can be ready
Yes.
with questions and looking forward to their resources. But what we found this year, guys, with this volume is that we actually had more authors and chapters talking about emotional and mental wellness than any other category.
Well, spiritual wellness was right up there with it.
Of course,
So,
and all
right?
of them are important, right? But we
Right.
weren't mad at it because we knew
Right.
the weight of the year. We knew that as we continue to talk about goals and things we do in community, that there was still a lot of grief going on. And so we're
Mhm.
super excited to be offering these stories and resources for you to connect to. And that's coming up. So go ahead and get your ticket. It is free to attend. We do have some VIP packages, right? So if you want to book, you want some of those stories, you want some Shalo Glow oil to help you with your joints and taking care of your moisture barrier. If you want some of these resources and one-on-one time with our experts, we'll have that in there, and just get connected to the information and reach out to us if you have any questions outside of that.
And we'll put it all in our show notes too. So
Yes.
just thanks for being here with us today. Thanks for listening. And we are always grateful to be connected. I really enjoyed our conversation today, Shannon. Thank you.
Yes, it was beautiful. Of course, of course. Okay, guys, we will be back next week live at 5. In the meantime, be wise. Excuse me, be well, be wise, be whole. We'll see you soon.